I was born in 1983. Every summer, I would visit my aunt's farm in Abergavenny, South Wales. I was out in the countryside and had many acres of land with fields, forests, and streams. When I was about 6 or 7, I had already spent a couple of summers there, and I knew the land quite well. I would spend 4 to 6 weeks there at a time. Because I was comfortable around the grounds, I never felt worried about exploring on my own. I would be among the hay bales in the barn, or riding a mountain bike around the fields, or just generally looking around to see what I could find. One day, the weather wasn't great. Not raining, but it was very murky and foggy outside, and also eerily silent. I was in one of the grassy fields adjacent to the farmhouse. I wasn't doing anything exciting. To be honest, I can't even remember what I was doing there. Suddenly, I started hearing my name being called, as clear as day. Paul? 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 I looked around, and I couldn't see anyone. Another nephew of my aunt, whose name was Nick, also lived on the farm. He was about 5 years older than me, and he did enjoy winding me up and playing tricks on me whenever he got the chance. I thought it was him. I heard the voice calling out to me again. Paul. 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 It was said in a manner that didn't sound panicked or menacing, just simply trying to get my attention. I looked around and noticed off in the distance, there was a horse stall, and I could see a person inside of it, calling to me, waving their arms above their head as you would expect to get someone's attention. Nick, what are you doing in there? I shouted as I started to walk towards the stall. I thought it must have been him, but from where I was standing, it didn't really look like him. Whoever it was appeared to have horns on top of their head that jutted backward. I was quite far though, so I thought that Nick might have had a stupid hat on or something. I continued to walk closer, and as I did, the figure in the stall seemed to fade. When I got there, the stall was completely empty. There was only one way a person could have gotten out, and that was directly in front of me. Not only that, the horse stall was in the middle of a large field, and there was nowhere that they could hide. But someone had definitely been in there, calling out to me and waving. They had a pair of horns on their head, and I definitely saw them fading as I approached. I ran straight back to the farmhouse and found Nick with my aunt and uncle, sitting at the kitchen table. I asked Nick if he had been outside calling to me, and he laughed and said, "I've been in here for hours, mate." Both my aunt and uncle confirmed this. To this day, I have no explanation as to who or what that thing in the horse stall was, but it's a memory I'll never forget. This all began many years ago. Growing up, my sister and I shared a bedroom in my parents' house. One day we decided to tack those plastic stars that glow in the dark to our ceiling. After that, we closed the windows and sat in the darkened room, which now resembled the night sky. I was sitting on the floor with my back against the wall while my sister sat in the middle of the bed. I suddenly saw a shadow appear in the corner of the room, like a black hole. It appeared next to the closet and began to head towards me. I was caught off guard, and I started kicking and cursing at the figure to go away. My sister was very confused when she saw me. At the time, she didn't see what I saw, but told me she felt a pressure on her shoulders and a cold wave rushing through her body. This wasn't the first time I had encountered the malevolent presence. However, it was the first time it manifested in my home. A few years prior, I had a horrible nightmare. In the dream, I was watching myself sleeping in my room, facing the door. I suddenly woke up as the bedroom door creaked open. A gray hand with several long black claws emerged from the darkness and wrapped itself around the wooden trim. A pair of hateful red eyes glared at me. I saw myself trying to scream, but nothing came out. I can't remember how it ended. The nightmare seemed to signify that something inhuman was trying to claw its way into my life. After that, I could feel a strange presence when I was in the living room or next to my bedroom window. It was as if something was outside my house, trying to get in. The most recent event happened after I moved out of that room. My sister told me that she was having trouble sleeping because of the uncomfortable feeling of being watched. She tried her best to ignore it. However, one morning she woke up screaming and literally ran out of her room, bawling her eyes out. My sister does not cry easy, and I never got the full story out of her as to what happened or what she saw. After that, she refused to go back in there. When I tried entering the room myself, I immediately felt the unearthly presence. Later on that night, my sister's boyfriend decided to come over to do a cleansing. While he was in the room performing the ritual, my sister and I were sitting in the living room, talking. The front door was next to us. We suddenly felt this surge of energy rush past us. The front door flung open, almost coming off its hinges. My sister got up and calmly closed the door. We both understood what just happened. My sister's boyfriend must have done one hell of a cleansing, because the dark spirit never returned. But from time to time in my dreams, I still see those soulless red eyes glaring at me, and I still feel its desire to crawl its way back into my life. This is going to be a long story, but to understand how all this started, I have to start from the beginning. I'm a happily married 28-year-old female. I have been with my husband since August of 2012. The summer before I met him, I was dabbling into some pretty dark stuff. I was studying witchcraft, reading tarot cards, and playing with Ouija boards. I'm no longer into that stuff, and I became a Christian. However, the consequences of my actions would later come back to haunt me. Being 19 at the time, I was in over my head. But as they say, curiosity killed the cat. I ended up performing an incantation. I'm not going to go into detail about what the spell was for personal reasons, but let's just say it worked. But like everything that deals with magic, there's always a cost. The result started perfectly, but ended up backfiring severely. I was so upset that I planned on trying it again. That's when the paranormal disturbances began. They started off very minor and cliché. Knocks on the walls, footsteps in the middle of the night, and night terrors. It happened so frequently that I managed to ignore it. Fast forward about 2 years. I was now with my husband at this time, but we weren't married yet. We fell on hard times financially, and for those reasons, we started living at my parents' house, the place where I performed all my witchcraft. Things started to take a turn for the worst, starting with the nightmares. It was absolutely terrifying and way too realistic. I dreamt that I was in my bedroom. I saw a strange light coming through my vanity mirror. I found myself sitting on my bedroom floor with my legs crossed, and my boyfriend was sitting on the edge of the bed. Neither of us spoke a word. We sat there in the same positions. Then suddenly my boyfriend asked me, "What's wrong with your face?" I got up from the floor and looked into the mirror. The light that was coming from the corner of the mirror made it hard to see at first, but when my eyes adjusted, I noticed my face starting to change. My normal face melted away and slowly turned demonic. That's when I lost control of my body. Before I knew it, I turned around and looked at my boyfriend and started laughing. It was a dark, deep, bone-chilling laugh. Then I began to levitate, pointing and laughing at my boyfriend, who sat there petrified. That's when I woke up, covered in sweat. I look over to my clock to see that it was 3:30 a.m. The next disturbance occurred not long after that. I would say about 6 months later. My boyfriend and I finally got on our feet. We bought a car and headed to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where we stayed with one of our friends. We both ended up getting great jobs. Cody, my boyfriend, was hired as a collision technician, and I got a job as a barista at Starbucks. While we were working and saving money, our schedules were completely different. Our roommate Kevin worked at a nursing home and would sometimes work at night and sleep in all day, or vice versa. Cody worked consistently from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Monday through Friday. I typically worked the same hours, but my days off didn't coincide with anyone else's. I tried getting as many weekends off as I could, but it wasn't always possible. The Starbucks I worked at was a little short-staffed, so I did a lot of overtime. One time, on a Thursday, I had the day off and I was home alone. My boyfriend and my roommate were both at work. I was the only female, living with 2 guys, so needless to say, I had a lot of cleaning to do. So I spent most of my day tidying up. It wasn't until around 1 p.m. that I finished. Since there wasn't much else to do, I was going to take a nap. I don't recall how long I was asleep, but as I laid there, I heard the front door of our apartment open, followed by footsteps. It sounded like Cody was home. I always kept the apartment door locked. Cody and Kevin were the only other ones with the keys. I kept listening as the footsteps approached the bedroom. I tried to get up to greet him, but I found myself unable to move or even open my eyes. I heard the bedroom door open and felt something sit at the edge of the bed. I then suddenly felt something grabbing my throat. The pressure made it difficult to breathe, and I was freaking out, completely paralyzed, unable to scream or speak. I began praying in my head, and slowly the entity loosened its grip, and I was finally able to wake up. I still felt pressure on my throat. I looked over to my clock to see that it was only 2:40 p.m. I was only asleep for about an hour and a half, and Cody didn't get home until almost 5. After I collected myself, I realized what happened to me wasn't a dream, and I didn't want to be home alone anymore. I didn't have the car, so I couldn't leave. I immediately called Cody at work, in tears, begging him to come home early. He said he would try his best, but he was in the middle of a big job and couldn't just walk away. So I had to sit in our apartment, alone, and just wait. I sat in the kitchen by the door until he called back and said that he was on his way. That was around 4 p.m. When he got home, I was still very upset, and I told him what happened. He did his best to comfort me. He believed me, which was a relief. He had experienced a few paranormal events himself when he was a kid. He said if it ever happened again when I was by myself, that I should pray. So from that point on, that's how I chose to deal with this. I was a Christian after all. Prayer helped at first, but soon, it wasn't enough. By this time, it was early 2017. Cody and I were married, and I found out that I was pregnant with our son. It was early into my pregnancy, the first trimester, so I slept a lot. I didn't really have morning sickness much, but I did get these awful headaches at night. Since I was pregnant, I wasn't allowed to take any over-the-counter medication to address it. So it was one of those nights where I felt a headache coming on. So I decided to go to bed. This was around 9 p.m. My husband was lying next to me, reading news articles on his phone. Not long after I fell asleep, I had a nightmare about a horned shadow figure attacking me, and I didn't have the strength to fight it off. It told me,
"We want the child. He belongs to us."
I fought back as best I could, and I began to pray out loud. When I would speak in my dream, I also spoke in my sleep, and my husband heard it. He told me that I wasn't speaking English. It didn't sound like it was my voice either. In fact, he said it sounded like several demonic voices speaking at once. I woke myself up, and the first thing I saw was Cody's terrified face. I tried my best to explain, but my emotions were all over the place. When I finally calmed down, I told him that even though what we heard come out of my mouth was utterly terrifying, what the figure in my dreams said was far worse because it involved our unborn child. After that experience, I was extremely paranoid throughout my entire pregnancy. I prayed all the time and hoped it would be enough to repel the demonic forces. Nothing else happened until the night I went into labor. The doctors told me that my due date was October 11th, but it turned out to be much later. My son ended up being born on October 30th, 3 a.m. Not even kidding. He was healthy, and the delivery went well, but his birth date has always been troubling to me, especially after that dream. When my son turned 2, we left Pittsburgh and moved in with my parents in Ohio just before the pandemic. When COVID-19 hit, we both ended up losing our jobs and applied for temporary unemployment. We wanted to get the money together for our own apartment in the next town over. We moved in September of 2020, and we have been here ever since. When we got here, my son started hearing things from my bedroom closet. He sleeps with us, and he started talking about something called the noise. He said he saw the noise poking his head out from the closet one night. He said that the noise lived in the closet and had a weird head. He was only 3 at the time, so he could only be so descriptive. Now fast forward to the summer of 2021. One night I was up late, scrolling through YouTube videos. I'm subscribed to almost every creepypasta and horror channel there is on YouTube. My favorites being Uncle Unit, of course, Darkness Prevails, Undead Storyteller, Slumber Reads, and Mr. Creeps. Anyways, as I was listening, my son was on my lap, and I stumbled across a video by Mr. Creeps with a thumbnail photo being that of a goat-like demon head, and my son immediately pointed at my phone and said, "Look, Mommy, it's the noise." My heart sank into my stomach, and I immediately started asking him questions. I made him tell me what the noise looked like, and also asked him, "Does it talk to you? If so, what does it say?" My son replied that the noise only talked to him in his bad dreams, but he could never tell what he was saying. I found this alarming, to say the least. The next day, I called my uncle, who is a pastor at a local church. I asked him to come over and bless our home. After telling him everything that led up to my son seeing the entity, he said that he would come, but since he worked as a truck driver on the side, he would have to stop by on his next day off, which wouldn't be for another 8 days. As I anxiously waited, life remained the same. My son didn't really mention anything about the noise much at all, and we were doing a lot of praying. About 4 or 5 days after I called my uncle, all 3 of us were upstairs in our spare bedroom that we turned into a video game lounge. We called it the Chill Cave. Me and Cody were playing Left 4 Dead 2 on the mini couch, and our son was playing on the floor with his Minecraft toys. We were so focused on the game that we didn't realize that our son had gotten up and left the room. I thought maybe that he was going to go to the bathroom, since we trained him early. But the next thing we knew, we heard a tumbling sound. My heart was racing so fast, because I knew the moment it happened that my son had fallen down the stairs. My husband and I didn't think twice, and we ran out of the room. My son was at the bottom of the landing crying hysterically. We made sure he was okay and checked him out. By some miracle, he only had a couple of bruises on his elbow and knee. He did not hit his head or break any bones, thank God. He was okay, just more or less stunned. When we finally calmed him down and put ice on his elbow and knee, we sat him down and asked him what happened, wondering if he had tripped on something or slipped on the rug. To my surprise, he said, "It was the noise, hiding in the bathroom. I tried to run away and hide from him, and he pushed me." I was so full of fear and anger after hearing this. I had officially had enough of this shit. So I did some research on how to bless our home properly and went all out with religious symbols and imagery. We walked around our home as a family, praying and asking Jesus Christ to remove the dark spirit from our home. We haven't had anything else happen since that day. If anything else does occur, I'll be sure to keep you updated. Until then, any advice or prayers will be greatly appreciated so that this demonic force never returns.
There's always a reason to be afraid.